In this existence, there are few certainties. But one thing we can be certain of is death and birth. And a few months ago I told you all of the birth of Jesus Christ. And tonight I would like to tell you all about the death of our Savior. The story begins with Jesus of Nazareth staring up into the stars. And Jesus was in deep prayer. Only a few minutes before, an angel had appeared and given him strength. And now he was in deep meditation, and as he sat there, he began to sweat blood, and the blood fell to the ground. Well, anyways, his disciples were present too, and they were praying hard. And as Jesus was praying, all at once from out of the brush there came men with clubs and swords, and they surrounded Jesus. And one of the disciples pulled out his sword, I believe it was Peter, and Peter ran forward and chopped off the ear of one of the men, the right ear to be exact. But Jesus yelled, "Stop!" And the man followed Jesus' command. Anyways, as Jesus stood there, Judas, one of the 12, appeared, and Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed Jesus on the head. Well, anyways, the men said, Take him away to Pilate." And so they did. But as they were doing this, a boy ran up with a linen cloth around him, and one of the men grabbed the linen cloth, but the boy ran away, leaving the linen cloth behind him. The Son of God was brought before a priest, who began to ask Jesus about his disciples and his doings. And Jesus said, "Ask them who follow me." And the 2 men guarding Jesus heard this and began to kick him on his shins and said, "Is this any way to talk to a priest?" So they brought Jesus before the high priest, and the high priest asked him, "Are you the Son of God?" And Jesus said, "I am, and I will come with my Father by my right hand on the clouds of heaven." And so the high priest got his priests together, and they began to discuss it, and they decided that Jesus was guilty. Anyways, the rest of the night they mocked him and jeered him, and the next morning they brought him to King Pilate. But King Pilate wanted nothing to do with him, so they brought him to King Herod. Now, when King Herod saw him, he was actually thrilled, and he began to question Jesus at great length. But Jesus remained silent. So King Herod became angry, and he put Jesus in a white robe and continued to mock him. Anyways, the next day he took him to King Pilate, and the 2 of them put a crown of thorns on Jesus' head and began to flog him with a whip. Anyways, they then brought him before the whole city, and King Pilate said, "You fool, don't you realize that I have the power to crucify you or set you free?" And Jesus said, "You have no real power. Only the mighty God has true power over anything." So King Pilate, he asked the people, "You have a choice. You can have Jesus of Nazareth crucified, or Barabbas can be killed." And they brought before Barabbas, who was a murderer and also had caused raids in the city. Well, anyways, the people yelled, "No, no, let Jesus of Nazareth die." So Jesus of Nazareth was taken to be crucified. Well, the soldiers took Jesus, and they began to beat him and mock him, yelling, "Hail Jesus, King of the Jews!" And Jesus was made to bear a heavy wooden cross, and he began walking towards the place of the skulls. But as Jesus walked towards this place, he became weary, and another man by the name of Simon came and helped Jesus bear the cross. Eventually they arrived at the top of the hill where 2 other men were being crucified, and the soldiers, they nailed Jesus' hand to the cross, and they lifted him up, and there he was, stood on the cross. Well, anyways, his mother Mary stood below, and she cried for her son, the Son of God. And anyways, all the soldiers and the two other men who were crucified said, "Jesus, if you are truly the Son of God, get off the cross. Have God take you off and be free." But Jesus did not reply. Anyways, eventually the soldiers and all the people left, and Jesus was on the cross for quite a while. And then suddenly, in the middle of the night, he let out a scream. "God, why have you abandoned me?" And then he died. And as he died, all the holy people that had died came out of their tombs and began to walk in the land of the living. Well, when Judas realized what he had done, he ran to the priest and he gave them 30 shekels and said, "I have killed an innocent man. Here, take the money back." But the priest wouldn't have it. So Judas ran and he threw the coins in the temple, and then he went and hung himself. Anyways, Mary Magdalene went to go to her son in his tomb. But when she got there, she found that the tomb had been opened up, and an angel was standing over it. And the angel said that Jesus had reawakened. Well, anyways, Mary ran and she told the disciples about this. And the disciples said that Jesus had been reborn. Anyways, she ran back and she saw 2 angels sitting in the tomb. And she began to cry. And the angel said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "Because I have lost my son." And she turned around and she saw a man that looked like her gardener. "Did they steal him from me?" she asked. "Did they steal my son from me?" And the man looked at her and he said, "Mary Magdalene." And she said, "My father." And she ran forward and she held him in her arms and she began to cry. Jesus had been reborn. It would sound like an impossible thing, an absurd thing, but as it is said, there is much more to the heavens and the earth than meet the eye. And as always, sweet dreams and good night.
O buon pastore che ci guidi, tu ci hai fatto per la luce.